Hey everybody, Danny with Chess.com back again to give you the breakdown. What were the best chess tactics, the most incredible combinations, the newest, most interesting ideas from Google's DeepMind report, assessing game balance with AlphaZero, exploring different rules to chess. I'm about to show you what at least my answers to those questions are, what my favorite tactics were, and what I thought some of the most instructive ideas and takeaways were. Without any further ado, let's jump right in. We've got our first position up for you. Now, this was one of my favorites. This is actually from a Torpedo game. Specifically, it was the AZ number 17. In case you're a real studious viewer out there and want to actually check out each game, I will try to call them out as we bring them up. So, in this particular one, which was actually no castling Torpedo, so an additional twist that they threw at us. White to move in this position doesn't look to be doing great, but there's actually a winning combination based on the fact that white can change everything based on our view of what Torpedo pawns can do, rhyme time intentional. So the move queen to c2 was uncorked by AlphaZero against AlphaZero. What a forking problem, right? Attacking undefended bishop and rook. Normally, you can't attack an undefended bishop with a queen on a diagonal because that means that bishop is just going to take you. And of course, that's exactly what AlphaZero did here. Without doing that, you would have either lost a free rook or a free bishop. And it's precisely because we are playing with the rules of Torpedo that white can play instantly on the spot. H8 equals a brand new baby girl, and the game was completely over. Really fun idea just to show you. Obviously, knight g8 is the only move here. White can finish it off in a number of different ways. Rook h6 is actually a crushing move, but bishop takes g5 was one I analyzed. Note that queen takes d4 allows bishop e3 and then over to c5 with an eventual checkmate attack. And taking this allows the knight to come into f4, more pieces joining the fight. The queen guards the d-pawn, and white goes on to have a crushing checkmate attack. So really exciting one. Again, that queen c2 combo is one we're going to remember because of that two-pawn Torpedo move, h8 queen. Another tactic from more Torpedo games was this one here, and similarly based on the idea that pawns can move twice all the way up the board, including when they get a new queen. In this position, if it wasn't for the fact that white had this move, queen takes e8, probably white's in big trouble. But queen takes e8, rook takes e8, and then the move a8 equals queen, again, only possible in Torpedo, is exactly what made this one interesting. And it combines that the most instructive or potential aggressive attacking idea in a Torpedo variant would obviously have to circle around promotion, right? Because those are the things that pawns all dream to do, getting to the end of the board. So seeing tactics like this, super interesting. Note that black is actually almost okay here and went on to draw with the move knight to c7. Later mistakes made, of course, but even with that tactic being super nice and instructive, it was still one that black could actually hold. Our third tactic, also from a Torpedo game, is probably the most instructive in terms of a defensive resource. In this current position, if it wasn't for the fact that we were playing Torpedo, the position is actually just losing for black. The threat is queen h5, and there isn't really a way to deal with this. The attack against the black king is going to be very real, combined with more material being lost, and the initiative will continue. But because it's Torpedo, and it is black to play, black can play the move f3. A move that clears away the fifth rank, the pawn leaving f5, opening up d5 and h5 to be incommunicado, meant that queen takes f3 was met by queen to d5 from our AlphaZero friend. And again, black actually went on to draw this game precisely because of that f5 to f3 sacrifice. Real quick, I guess I should make sure I mention, I did promise you I would mention for the studious viewers which game number it was from each report. The number 2 combo Torpedo was actually AZ10. And then our last one was actually from the same game, actually. I believe the f3, f5 idea was actually from the same AZ10. Again, you can check out the report to make sure that my math is correct. So we continue to move forward past our Torpedo tactics. We did both of those particular combos from AZ10. Now let's move on to what I mentioned in my top 10 breakdown was one of my favorite potential variants, pawns moving backwards. This is so counterintuitive to how we think of the way we develop strategies. Pawns are the only pieces that can't go back, right? But also, the reason I ranked it higher than some of the others is because pawns not being able to move backward and the fact that they're the only piece that can't move back is something that's a little bit tough for beginners to get, right? So again, I was taking a full view in my ranking of what would be the applicable approach of that variant on a global scale to all levels of chess understanding. And is it something that currently is a perception issue with the game? And I think in some ways it's very clear that we love the fact that there's strategy built around the static nature of pawns, but also some interesting things to consider. What if pawns could move back? Would it make it easier for people to understand stuff? And would it give us great positions like this, which is a very fun one to have? Because if you turn the eval bar on in this fen, you'll see that it says that white is totally winning. That's because normal stockfish and Komodo look at the fact that there's a fork coming to c7. This pawn has gone way too far, and there's really nothing you can do to take it to stop the fact that you overextended in the center and your dark squares are a serious problem. Unless, of course, you're playing pawns move backward chess, in which case the move pawn to e5 is played. Now copy that exact same fen, challenge for the viewers, and go give it to a new position and watch the eval bar go from +3 for white to +3 for black, right? So just really, really funny and crazy stuff there with a pawn moving backward, reunifying the pawns together in the center, protecting the c7 square, and I found that to be a very, very fun defensive idea. That was taken from AZ23 as we continue to work our way through our list here. Well, let's do another pawn moves backwards here. This was another example of a slightly less impactful pawn moving backward, but one I wanted to show because in what could be a bad French, a French kind of gone wrong with pieces on the queen side, yes, but maybe not with any real future here. This is a position where pawns moving backwards, maybe not just for defensive purposes, but for aggressive purposes to change the way we would evaluate an otherwise closed middle game. The move pawn to d6 for black would be a fantastic idea. Suddenly black is in a position to try to undermine white's center in multiple ways. Suddenly that bishop is a beast of a piece over here on b7. And again, something that would never be possible in traditional chess, right? Pawns moving backward. We've seen it from a defensive middle game standpoint, an aggressive middle game standpoint, and the third pawn moving backward I wanted to show was just a basic concept that it would also allow us in some ways to move pawns around our king, knowing we could eventually move them back. Now, obviously, this isn't even a legal position, but just a concept I wanted to throw out there that a mate that I thought of in my head that could be stopped might be something like moving a pawn backwards to protect the king from an otherwise checking piece, right? So, again, the pawn moving backwards does open up a lot of thoughts in terms of how we might approach and evaluate things. Now, one I had higher than that was pawns moving sideways, and for good reason. I'm going to go through an opening here, a crazy opening trap, and this game was actually taken from, let's see, this was from AZ27, I believe. That's right, AZ27. So here in the report, we had an opening that led to an early piece sack. We love how our neural nets approach chess in such an aggressive way. Knight takes e5, a super fun move to get d5, and the main point is that this knight has to move away, and that white will then regain the g4 pawn, have a couple peshki for the sacrifice piece, and maybe some great compensation. But in this particular position, AlphaZero surprised his AlphaZero opponent with a pawn moving sideways move that would change the way you think about this position altogether. The move pawn to g7 was actually played in this game. Again, sliding the pawn over opens up the file, the H file, and you might see something happen over here with an idea like queen h4 coming, with ideas down, the h file being pretty devastating. So again, a super interesting idea that we might be able to slide pawns over and open up files that otherwise were not. So again, the combo that I was showing was right here. This idea of sliding the pawn to g7, opening up the h file might be something that is super interesting to consider for the future. Another pawn moving sideways was maybe my favorite combination. This was actually from a different game. I believe this was AZ32. If I'm not, no, this was AZ29. This was pawn moving sideways, AZ29. So we saw this slide to G7. I already mentioned that the opening and reopening of files was one of the things in my top 10 video that I thought would be super interesting about pawns moving sideways, but also opens up crazy tactics, right? A file where normally we know we don't want to open files when our king is in the center. Well, what if the pawn can move sideways and open it whether you liked it or not? In this particular position, AlphaZero played bishop takes g5, double exclam, and the game is just over, because after queen takes g5, the move is pawn sliding to f4 with discovered check and the win of the lady on g5, right? So again, this one didn't make my top 5 for a reason, right? It is counterintuitive. It's not the way we've approached chess, and obviously, you know, if not for this paper, probably wouldn't be considering it. But I did find it to be something that especially just from the tactical possibilities, and we saw what it did to increase decisive results, especially in some of the dubious openings that they made it play. Again, if you don't know the video or stats I'm talking about, click the link below. Check out my top 10 breakdown, or the TLDR, if you will, of everything we needed to learn from AlphaZero's report. So again, another pawn moving sideways tactic that would just be super instructive. But now we get into my favorite tactics, right? I mentioned that the number 3 on my list in the other video was also my favorite, but I couldn't rank it higher because I don't know that it's really more likely that self-capture becomes more popular than stalemate equaling a win, or certainly over classical chess. But maybe it should be. As Vladimir Kramnik said, maybe self-capturing is just an improved, more fun version of chess. In this particular position, again, after an opening, we will show you nothing super spectacular here. We had this position reached from a standard Ruy Lopez, and in this position, after queen h4, g3, in classical chess, as it was noted, black would have to retreat his queen to a bad square, so why did he even come to h4? And it's probably just losing in the opening. But quid quo pro when it comes to self-capturing chess, the best move here for black that ends the game, at least with a very, very strong attack, is the move queen takes h7. You take your own pawn on h7, and suddenly you have a battery that your opponent can't defend against. This was a lot of fun to see, right? Because there's an idea I could get behind. Self-capturing your own pawn to open up an aggressive battery. But what about self-captures for other reasons, right? Well, there are so many games we see after very, very long and hard-fought battles, you just can't make a breakthrough. Regardless of Magnus Carlsen not believing in blockades, we know that blockades exist. But what if they didn't? What if we had a self-capture variant, something like this, where white is winning because of the very obvious, now that we're in self-capture mode, I'll let you find it if you want to pause the video. Okay, assuming you did, of course the move is king takes g4. You capture your own pawn and you change the whole game, right? The king is going to enter and black is completely lost. The king will make his way in, and eventually the rook will outplay the king and bishop here. So self-capturing your own pawn is something that would eliminate maybe the entire concept of a blockade. Love that idea. We've seen aggressive self-capture open files, aggressive breakdowns of blockade. Now let's see an aggressive self-capture that has to do with defense. In case you're looking at this position with wide eyes, you're saying, wait, Dan, isn't that checkmate on the board? You're right, but not if we're playing self-capture chess. White can play the move king takes f2, and this was actually from one of the games. This was a literal game. I'm going to find it here. It was AZ33. So king takes g4 and the other open file idea were actually suggestions from Kramnik, I believe, if you go through the report, as far as kind of composed ideas of the nature of what self-capturing would do, which is why I didn't mention those. But this is actually AZ33, and we got to get 2 tactics from it. One, we start with king takes f2. No longer am I mated along the open h-file, sir. I can capture my own pawn. That idea is seen again in this next position here, where the king is checked and would be just in a drawn position, having to go back and forth, if not for the fact that white could self-capture his own pawn. Going here would allow white to just sacrifice the queen and eventually win. So in this case, the self-capture, while it didn't actually lead to a win, this is from the same game, AZ33, eventually a draw, it did lead to a lot more chess, a much longer, more hard-fought battle where players could keep the game going. Super interesting, right? One of the main reasons we're doing this study is the decisive experiment, the decisive hypothesis. Could changing things lead to some more excitement on the board of 64 squares? And this one here, I think, is a great example of something that could be. Now, the next position is one that I made up myself, and that's because I think if there's one concept that would completely maybe leave the game if it was for the self-capture institution, that would have to be the fact that there may never be a back rank checkmate ever again. Here's one of the most famous chess tactics in the world, a deflection idea that is based around the terrible, terrible weakness that is a potential back rank tactic. If you don't know this position, you can pause the video and I'll let you try to solve it for black, but it's a very well-known combo. The recognition of the D1 checkmate square allows black to find queen to b2 double exclam. An overwhelming amount of threats now face white, with the queen, the rook, and the d1 square all being under fire. Obviously, queen takes b2 would allow rook d1 checkmate. There's the intermezzo tactic, rook c8, kind of a desperado, pointing out that if black takes, white actually is winning, because now you guard the checkmate. But of course, after rook to c8, black just gives a check, trades the queens first, and then wins a rook. A great combo, a super instructive idea where we take advantage of a back rank weakness. Again, unfortunately, it just doesn't work. If you play queen to b2, now I'm going to play queen takes b2, and when you play the move rook to d1 check, no more checkmate, just self-capture my own pawn. And I really found it fascinating that if we could self-capture the amount of aggressive ideas, the amount of defensive ideas, and that we might actually see the elimination of some chess themes that have existed forever, like back rank checkmate. I just found that fascinating, and again, it's why the self-capture section, my personal favorite section from the report that was given to us from DeepMind. So with that, actually, we're gonna bring the favorite tactics section here to a close and remind you that coming up next is going to be one on the entire subject of stalemate being a win. So many interesting ideas there, so many potential concepts that could change the game quite literally. It deserved its own video in my mind. So leave a comment down below. Do you like the tactics I pulled here? Did you read the whole report from DeepMind? And do you think I missed something? Let me know if there was a tactic you feel I should have covered in this video down below. I love the feedback, while always constructive in its nature. And please give us a sub, give us a like, share the video with your neural net machine learning friends and family. And we will see you in our next video here, breaking down the awesome chess that was from the Assessing Game Balance with AlphaZero, looking for new rules to the game of chess.